I think the biggest thing about designing a show, though, when it comes to making effect, though, it's got to be a show that your staff and your kids can relate to, rather than try to force them into something they can't relate to. And
Absolutely.
I think from your end, too, the music literature, if you don't have the orchestration to make it work, it's never going to be effective.
Right. Yeah, excuse me, I completely agree. It's really hard to do a Mahler symphony if you don't have a large band, and try to pull something like that off, because there is a certain stigma. There's something about the orchestration and the techniques that it's written for. So I think that's when the creativity becomes involved, if you want to use something like that. But you have to know your ensemble. You have to know its strengths and its weaknesses. You have to know what you want to teach them, and the experience that they want to have at the end. So that's absolutely what I try and think about first and foremost.
Yeah. And I do the same thing even with the programs that ask me to write for them. That's what I ask them. What's your style? What's your orchestration when they hand me the music, and say, are you really sure that this is something that's going to be effective?
Like you said earlier, finding your identity.
Yeah.
And knowing what your identity is, and then how is it going to fit the overall shape and goal, not just for this year, but like where you want to go in the future.
Yeah. And that's your staff as well.
Right.
I mean, you can't, if you're trying to design a show visually that's really theatrically based in terms of staging and not drill, and you don't have people on staff that understand theatrical staging or coordinating those events, it's not going to be very effective.
Right.
Where if you're a drill-based staff, then you need to do more of that. And I'm sure musically too, if you're a jazz background, trying to do
classical Mozart, Beethoven, if it's not in your wheelhouse, yeah. Yeah, one of the things that actually I've tried to think about a lot is originality and creativity. Because how do you make, if you're going to do Beethoven 5, everyone knows Beethoven 5, how are you going to make that original and creative? Well, I think there's something to be said about that. We go see professional orchestras play Beethoven 5 for a certain reason, even though it's old music, that it's still, people go and see it because it moves them in some type of way. So you don't always have to be constantly reinventing the wheel, right. But I think the way that it's presented, there's creativity and originality in presenting a masterpiece like that, maybe in its original form. Yes. So I think sometimes people get caught up in manipulating these arrangements to the point that they're almost not recognizable, or they take away from the quality of music already written there. And that's what the fine balance is. If you throw a woodwind feature into a piece of music, does it really benefit the overall architecture of the music?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I always try and think about those type of things.
So things I like to talk about too when it comes to designing the show and whether it's going to be effective or not is, what are the tools that we have to use? I mean, what do we really have? So the first thing I'll sit down with our people and the band director and say, so how will the trumpet section be this year? Or how will the baritone section be? Who are our best soloists? It just amazes me that sometimes when children are put in front of an audience that aren't necessarily soloist material, what does that say about your program?
Right.
Use them if you have them. If you don't have them, it's not a requirement to be effective. You don't have to use those tools.
Yeah. What's the word? Compulsories? We
Yes.
were talking about that earlier. Making sure that we had in figure skating, you check the box. You don't necessarily have to have a percussion feature. You don't have to have a woodwind feature or soloists.
I think one of the features that are very effective that people overlook a lot are the front ensembles today. Mm-hmm. With the electronics, the miking of the keyboards, I think a lot of people forget that that's a really key component in creating a little more variety in the effects that you can generate musically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's an underutilized position. I think just because it's not a comfortable zone for people, they don't really understand the electronics and how that can change the soundscape on the field, and use it as an advantage of a tool they're playing while the winds and brass relax. Yeah. So. Yeah, for sure. The one thing I wanted to ask you, and I know I asked you this before, is as a visual effect judge, how does the music come into your own personal judging and how you balance the two?
I really don't let a personal preference come in at all, because obviously as long as I've judged and as much as I've seen even in the United States and abroad, they're so different. So you really have to be careful about that and really remove that part of it from the mix. I really let the music speak, whatever kind it is. It doesn't matter to me. When it engages me, then I just hope whatever the visual is as equally as engaging as the music. I try to leave personal bias out of it. And that is a hard thing to do as a great judge, because everybody has a background or a comfort zone that they like. But I think the more you, as a seasoned judge, you learn to put those other things aside and just respect it for its great design qualities and what they are.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to add to that too, and I think it's a great comment for, especially for new teachers, is effect doesn't happen by accident. And I think a lot of people think it's going to just happen.
It's the magic.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's something as a staff you really have to think about, as I know we talk a lot about. It's not just the moment, it's the setup into the moment.
Right.
The moment and the release after the moment are critical elements. And that's not even just musically, that's visually, that you really have to make sure that when you're in that whole process, what is the moment supposed to be? How do we make it the most effective that we can by either creating visual energy, we create some speed so we can get in a halt form. Do we layer the music? Can we bring different instrumentation in? Can we do something with the drum line that creates that same kind of tension? So when you have a big moment, it all culminates together.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree with you. And one of the things that I was talking about this earlier with Joe, that we would actually give numbers to each of the points. I think I either learned it from David or Freddie that like this moment is the 10 of the show, then here's the 8, and here's the 7 and the 6, and you work for the students to get them. Okay, do you think that was the highest point of the show? You watch this as an audience member,
yeah.
And so like you said, you're manufacturing these different arrival points. It doesn't happen by accident.
And I think the time of the year has a lot to do with the effect too. And again, there's different theories on it. The groups that I like to work with and I teach is like we always, like where we are right now in this time of the season, it's still about the dots and the notes on the page.
The micro, yeah.
It really isn't about the performance quality yet. It's really, can they do it? Can they get through it? And can they survive without getting hurt, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Right. So I, a lot of times I know that we teach, it is very mechanical this time of the year, but then it really is producing the effect moments and making sure it's the right blend and balance of the visual and the audio, and then really even talking to the kids about what this moment's supposed to be. What's it supposed to feel like? What's that arrival emotionally supposed to mean to them? And I think sometimes we forget to tell the kids those kind of things, how they can be a part of the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you have to engage them and then make them view it as an audience member. And I think that helps. Keep this going. So yeah, one of the things that I wanted to say, the ideas that I had is, as a classically trained musician who got into this world and had no idea, I did not go to a BOA school, I did not go to a competitive high school. So when I started being a band director and I'm trying to understand this visual world, I started watching a bunch of ballet videos and I started watching a bunch of opera and musical theater on YouTube just to understand the connection between music and visual and who are the outstanding directors that do that so well that not only engage you musically, but then you also have you have to watch. Everything draws you in this kind of universal experience. Right. So that might be a tip for young directors out there is go watch, the ballet, watch something that has a design component to the visual that is accompanying music, because you see colors, you see architecture, you see build up to moments that really move people. Yeah. So
yeah, absolutely. Anything you can go see, and one of the best at it, which is really funny, is if you really want to watch something and dissect it differently, Disney is the master of creating effect and creating emotion and creating entertainment, whether it's animated or not, whether real movies. They have this figured out. A word we've not used when it comes to effect is pacing.
Right.
The events of the moments. I heard you talking earlier about a roller coaster. We want to build them up. We want to settle them down a little bit, build them up again. That's what Disney, if you really want to get an understanding of great pacing, watch any Disney movie or cartoon. It's brilliant in terms of how they pace out events, and even musically, how their orchestration of music just has an energy that takes you somewhere and then sits you back down.
No matter the piece of music, it's what makes a great piece of music. And I think there are a lot of directors out there that will say, well, I don't do BOA, I don't do these big competitive bands. That's just music in general. No matter the piece that you're playing, if it's a grade 3 piece of music or it's the Hindemith Symphony, there is architecture to that, and you can teach your kids to play with that. And then you can also teach them to move that way.
Absolutely.
While they're doing it. So I think that you have to build on the elements, which everyone's in the process of right now. Just getting comfortable and trying not to run into each other as they're learning the shows and trying to put them on the field.
Yeah. And I'm just general too about shows, and talked a little bit the first time around is, everybody's so caught up now that my show has to have a story to be a winner, to be as competitive as everybody else. And I think that's a very big myth now today. Yeah. It doesn't need to be that. Yeah, it's nice to have a thought process that's unique, that makes your program unique. But I've seen a couple of bands this year already. They just come out and march and play, and they are pretty doggone good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you don't have to, hold the audience's hand so much,
Yeah.
but you want to leave that kind of air of mystery while also.
And I think you made a good point. Not everybody here is a competitive marching band, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
The school that I teach at is not a competitive marching band, but they're really good. But that's their identity. They just want to be a really entertaining, crowd-pleasing marching
Exactly.
band. You know what? And that's what we're all in this for. From the bands, they're here to entertain a crowd.
Yeah,
So there is nothing wrong with that.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Cool.
Okay, did you guys do okay?
Yeah, it was pretty
was okay.
nonviolent.
They-
We're
they
good.
did okay.
Bloodshed.
No bloodshed? No, it was okay. The eternal quest to find out whether musical or visual is the most important, and what we discovered is that things have changed so drastically that they're now totally linked.
Absolutely.
That's,
In most cases now, effect now is not effect music and effect visual anymore. It's effect as a whole. You really can't have one without the other. You can't have a great visual effect if the music is not effective. And if you really want the most effective moment, the visual's got to match the musical effect moment. So how do you judge one without the other? And that's really the thing I really like where this activity between all of them are evolving, that it's now effect. And that's really how it should be.
oh, that's really good. And, quite honestly, the discussions that you guys presented here just in these last few minutes, it's so important for everyone to understand that everything that you had to say about your specific area relates to the other area too.
Absolutely.
And that was the most remarkable part of it. And I think we've got an incredible interview that took place between you guys. Okay, we're not going to call it a presidential debate yet. Okay, but the fact is that it's just great. It's great to have you come back in too.
Thank you.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Once again, we're going to step away for just a brief moment to hear a word from one of our sponsors, and then we'll come back with some more interviews and things that are going on here in Fulton County, Georgia.